I glanced tiredly at the cordless phone on the wall. It was 5:30 a.m., and I was in the kitchen preparing my husband Frank's lunch for work that day. I stared at the phone, confused for a moment, because it was very unusual for anyone to be calling so early. I began to feel an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach, hoping that nothing bad had happened. I've seen it many times before on TV shows and movies where someone gets an early morning phone call or a knock at the door from the police coming to deliver terrible news. Both of my parents were old and going through health problems lately. As I gently placed the jar of mayo on the island, I began to walk rather quickly to the phone. My heart began to beat out of my chest because it just occurred to me that my mother had been in the hospital just last week due to a broken hip. I hope she wasn't having any complications from her surgery. I rushed in a panic towards the phone and nearly tripped over my own 2 feet. I picked it up and asked, "Hello?" Nothing but silence. Maybe the caller hadn't heard me. "Hello?" I uttered a little louder this time. A quiet voice mumbled. I instantly froze because I immediately recognized the distinctive voice. It was a voice that I had not heard in 12 years. I just stood there, paralyzed, not knowing what to say. I briefly caught sight of the calendar hanging next to the light switch. Oh my goodness, I hadn't even realized. It was exactly 12 years ago today since I had last seen or spoken to the person who was on the other end of the line. Finally, I muttered, "Sorry, dear, you must have the wrong number." Before I was able to hang up, the voice at the other end yelled, That confirmed what I had already known all along. It was Lizzie, my one and only daughter. I briskly hung up the phone and unplugged it. I tried to return to preparing the rest of Frank's lunch, but I just couldn't focus. As I retrieved the mayo jar from the island, my hands began to shake uncontrollably. I sat the jar back down. Frank strode into the kitchen, headed straight to the cabinet, and grabbed a coffee mug. As he began to pour the steaming hot coffee from the pot to his mug, he asked me, "Linda, who was that on the phone?" I was in a daze. Should I just tell him it was the wrong number? When I didn't respond, he repeated the question, sounding a little annoyed. So I looked up at him. My skin was as pale as a ghost, and replied, "Lizzie." "Lizzie? Lizzie who?" he questioned, looking at me puzzled. "We only know one Lizzie, Frank," I said to him. He snatched his lunchbox off of the island and angrily shouted, "I don't have time for your nonsense, Linda." Then he marched to the door and slammed it fiercely on his way out. The loud bang startled me and snapped me back to reality. I must have been dreaming all along. It was impossible that it could have been Lizzie on the phone. She had been dead for the past 12 years. I'm sure of it. Because it was exactly 12 years ago that Frank and I murdered our daughter Lizzie in cold blood. Subscribe for a new story Mondays, Wednesdays, and don't forget Saturdays. See you next time on
Nina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.